Hi friend, I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. My name is Katie. Welcome to my channel if you're new. Welcome back if you've been here before. This is an AI-free zone, a place where there's content made by humans for humans. And here, tonight, I'm going to read you the first ever bedtime story that I wrote. It is a fairy tale in a modern day setting. Though the storyline might get a little bit dark, I have kept it platform friendly, and it is a fairy tale as I have envisioned it to be in the modern day. So, cuddle up and let's get reading. This story is called Nora's Sanctuary. Nora sat perfectly still, her knees tucked close to her chest. Her limbs felt frozen in place, like the darkness around her acted as an invisible rope holding her in place. The air was so cold, her breath created tiny clouds of ice that seemed to freeze for a second before vanishing. Her mind felt empty suddenly, and she had no idea how she got to the spot. Just a minute ago, it was daylight. She could swear she was just running on the same path through the forest a few trees north of her cottage this very afternoon, yet here where she sat now, stuck in place like an iceberg in the middle of the ocean, and just as cold, she felt safe in the uncertainty of the darkness. The hairs on her arms standing up as her skin turned to goosebumps. The forest around her turned quiet, too quiet suddenly. It felt as though hours had passed in the blink of her deep, dark gray eyes. Stuck she was, and yet she knew if this tree moves, if she moves, if the darkness lifted, might give away her hiding spot from the world in the safe curtain of the thick cascading leaves, as though this weeping willow tree was alive and purposely protecting her. The thick, knobby, ancient trunk, the only safety. As though the tree understood the danger, like some ancient wisdom understanding that any movement, any sound, would allow the monster hunting Nora right to her. Nora was a beautiful woman, her long, black, curly, thick hair all the way down to her back, deep gray eyes, faint, fair, cool-toned, pale white skin. Yet, for her entire life, the reflection in the mirror had looked back at her, broken, never smiling, her eyes cold and always afraid. Nora had grown up in a house where she never knew safety. Her mother and father never at peace. Her mother bitterly hated her, and her father, a monster of another kind. He was hardly ever home. And when he was, her mother would have to keep Nora home from school to hide the bruises that his whiskey-fueled rage would leave all over her tiny body. At school, she was bullied. She would hide in the school library whenever she could, surrounded by the beautiful books that would keep her safe from the outside world. Her life had been nothing but a blur, until one day, shortly after her 18th birthday, she had used a little bit of money she saved from her job as a waitress at the only tiny diner in town. Just enough for a one-way ticket anywhere, far, far away from this hellscape. As the bus left the station, it felt for the first time as though she could let go of the breath she had been holding her entire life. With nothing more than a small suitcase and hope, she had purchased a ticket for the only bus that would take her so far away that no one would know her and she could start her life. Her life for the first time. She found a job at a tiny library in that small town. She cleaned the library at night, and at first she was allowed to work the desk of the library when the old librarian went on lunch. Until one day, when the librarian asked her if she would mind taking over the tasks, as the old woman could hardly hold a single book in her arthritis-twisted hands. Mrs. Brothner had been the librarian in town for over 50 years. She was tired and worn down, no longer capable of running her library on her own. Mrs. Brothner could see the love Nora held for the old rows of books, and the kindness she held for the children and the old folks that roamed these rows of books every day. Nora felt at home. Finally, she had found her place in the world. Mrs. Brothner had become like the grandmother that Nora had never known. She had taken kindly to Nora and helped her to create a life in this small town. Mrs. Brothner rented a room to Nora when she had started working at the library as a cleaner. Nora also became Mrs. Brothner's carer. When she was not working at the library, she tenderly cared for the kind old soul whom she had come to love. She had taught Nora to cook by sitting at the table, kindly sharing recipes, never getting angry, never getting upset when the food was overcooked or when she'd accidentally dropped a glass or a plate. Kindness that Nora had never known that she had ever even deserved. It was a summer's twilight afternoon when she heard his voice for the very first time. Jack Alexander had finished his tour in Iraq and had moved back home to live with his aunt and work at his uncle's garage as a mechanic. His dark blonde hair softly framing his face, his blue-green eyes sparkling in the setting sun, the most beautiful man that Nora had ever seen. He had started walking her home every night after that. Not too many months later, after many a midnight stroll, fun dates, long nights of talking on the phone where Nora had opened her heart to her soulmate, as he called her, for the first time in her life, feeling safe enough to tell anyone about her childhood horrors. Jack had promised that he would keep her safe. The weeks passed, and one morning she opened the library to the sound of Jack's voice. She melted into his arms as he quietly whispered the proposal into her ear, and he softly kissed her down her neck. He took her hand and placed the most beautiful white gold pearl ring on her finger. She had yet to learn. But with that pearl, the curse had been sealed almost as though mystically. She had yet to learn of the darkness to come. Mrs. Brothner had become very sickly, almost as though overnight. The cancer had taken over her entire body. On the morning of her courthouse wedding, Mrs. Brothner called Nora into her room. She placed a book in Nora's hand, and she told Nora that when the day comes, this book would lead her home, and she would find peace. As she embraced Mrs. Brothner softly, she had no idea that by that evening, the only person that she had ever felt pure love from would be gone. And so, what was one of the happiest days of Nora's life had also become one of the saddest. Jack had moved in with her that night instead of them moving into his garden flat at his aunt and uncle's home, as was originally planned. Mrs. Brothner had left all her worldly possessions to Nora. The house, the library, all now belonged to Nora. Yet a dark sadness began to linger in her heart, and she felt one morning a sadness that brought back the old sense of holding her breath. She had told Jack of her sadness and how she missed Mrs. Brothner. He took her into his arms, embracing her a little too tightly, and whispered that her sadness will pass. She is now his, and he will love her enough. His eyes portraying an expression that said, "You don't want me to be broken, do you?" The tears in his cold eyes telling her her emotions were too big without a single word. That was the last time she had shared any of her feelings with Jack. She did not understand the familiar feeling creeping in slowly, the curse twisting her peace into a sudden, painful darkness that she was too familiar with. It started as these things normally do, slowly. First, Jack would get angry over little things. He would suddenly burst out and yell at her each time, promising he would change, only to follow weeks later with more anger. Always a promise to change, lovingly embracing her, begging her to stay, his eyes begging her to love him, forgive him. The next time a shove, the next a slap, until one day she had to stay home, keeping the library closed for the first time, as the marks on her body were too visible, and he had begged her to protect him. With every promise, with every act of protecting the very same monster that she had known as a child, she grew quieter. Day by day, she kept the library open just a little later, until one night, when all hell would unleash the darkness in Jack so bitter, so hateful, she found herself lying on her bed, her body broken. The pain searing through her body, her head throbbing, her throat stung. She had locked herself in Mrs. Brother's room after Jack had left the house, knowing he had crossed a line that they had both never known existed. She must have dozed off. She realized that as she heard Jack knocking on the door. She woke up as he started yelping, begging her to open the door. He promised he would change. It would be the last time, sobbing, crumbling every other word into a whisper. As his begging and sobbing grew first into a louder whisper, she heard him fall to his knees, Jack knocking his head into the door as his words turned into a blur of weak sobbing, breaking away every last drop of love she had once felt for him. Her eyes opened, and Nora noticed something that had not been on the bedside table when she had fallen asleep. It was the book that Mrs. Brodner had given her on that morning of her wedding, the day she had left Nora alone in the shadow realm. She opened the book, and written inside, she noticed the inscription. When you need safety, run to the trees that will lead you to safety. The trees will set you free. Find me under the curtain of the ancient weeping willow tree. There was a map, a silver key, and a thick wad of cash, all hidden inside the small box, placed inside a secret section cut into the pages of the thick book. Nora instantly knew then what she had to do, and as though adrenaline woke up her soul, allowing her limbs to move, as though they were healed in an instant, just enough to go where she needed to go, to do what she needed to do. She got up, opened the door. She took Jack into her broken arms and helped him to their bed. She could hear herself softly tell him the words that she knew he needed to hear, and she softly whispered him to sleep, while the smell of his whiskey breath hurled into her senses, her voice barely able to form the words as pain once again seared in her throat. As soon as he was asleep and his snoring filled the house with a sad, melodic agony, she removed the ring from her finger, placed it on the nightstand next to Jack, and she quietly left her home. Once she was outside, she ran. She ran like she had never run before. She did not know where the strength came from, but with nothing but her book in her arms, she ran all the way into town. When she got to the bus station, the station master nodded and told her in a soft, knowing voice which bus to take, and pointed her in the right direction with a kind urgency. The bus driver gave her one look over and nodded, smiling kindly. She was alone on that bus. She felt her lungs open up once again, air freely calming her heart. The book clasped tightly to her chest as the bus left the station, and as though the bus driver understood the assignment, she could feel the bus speed up and rush away out of town. Her town, her home, far, far away to safety. A happy, freeing sadness came over her, and in the first time in many months, maybe even years, she felt a tear run down her cheek. She had turned her head to look out the window, and for the first time she caught a glimpse of her own reflection, her face broken for what she knew would be the very last time. So she smiled, and her own reflection bringing a warmth into her heart. As the bus halted to a stop, Nora woke up feeling rested and safe. The bus driver looked at her, smiling kindly, and he pointed to a path through the small town. His voice kindly speaking, telling her to follow the small road and she will find a little cottage. Nora did not stop and wonder how he knew exactly where to send her. She got up, she smiled, she opened her mouth to say thank you, yet her throat hurt so badly and not a single word would come out. Touching her neck, she felt the pain shoot through her, almost as though Jack's hands were curled around her throat once again. The bus driver opened the door and told her to stop at the doctor's office before she walked through the town. She noticed that the bus stop was right across the road from a small doctor's office. She smiled and nodded, mouthing a thank you at the kind stranger who seemed to know her since forever. It was late morning when Nora unlocked the door of the most picturesque cottage that she had ever seen. The garden overgrown with purple and yellow flowers. All the furniture inside covered in white sheets. Nora's eyes caught something lying on the floor, a white envelope, her name and the address to the cottage, written in Mrs. Brothner's cursive handwriting. Nora had purchased some food items, clothes, and medicine from town. When she walked into the small kitchen, she put her bags on the small counter. After cleaning the teapot and a cup she found in a small kitchen cupboard above the counter, Nora made herself a cup of tea. She opened the envelope and read the letter. As though she could hear the voice of her beloved Mrs. Brothner, the words on the paper danced to life. The letter telling the story of how once upon a younger year, Mrs. Brothner had been a woman in love. Her husband swept her off her feet in a whirlwind romance that ended with Mrs. Brothner running away in the night. She had found her way to this cottage once owned by the librarian who owned a library before her, whom had taken her in. Her husband had somehow found her. Someone in town called the police, and he had been captured at just the right moment. For years, she had no memory of how she got back home. She just remembered being back at the library one day, and life went on slowly until Nora found her way into the library, and for the first time in her entire life, Mrs. Brothner had felt as though she had a purpose. When Jack came into town, the very night he walked Nora home for the very first time, Mrs. Brothner had had a dream about the cottage, and that she would have to prepare a plan out for Nora. The letter ended with a declaration of motherly love and a hope that Nora would never read this letter. However, should she read it, to know that she would always be with her, and a simple favor request: to go for a walk in the forest every afternoon and to find the weeping willow tree. Or maybe the tree would find her when the time was just right. The days turned into beautifully peaceful weeks. Every afternoon, Nora would go for a walk in the forest. She would walk into town every other day to purchase food and all of life's necessities. She found herself happy, and she knew that she would never allow another soul to destroy her peace ever again. As spring became summer, Nora found herself working in the garden, planting roses and daisies and all kinds of beautiful flowers. Her garden, her home. She felt a sad longing for her books and her beautiful library. She would buy a few books in town, and yet she would still feel her heart tug at the thought of the locked library that she had to leave behind. Whenever the sadness would take hold of her heart, she would close her eyes and remember Mrs. Brothner, and somehow she would feel in her heart of hearts that this was temporary, and that somehow she would find her way home to her library and be free to love her books and the people coming to escape the world for a small moment again one day. It was one Sunday afternoon, early September, when the air would change and everything she knew about the world would turn into a nightmare once more. She had just finished her walk through the forest, and she was about to pass under the last few trees on her way back to the cottage when she felt her lungs stop as her eyes focused on the truck in the front of the road, as his voice filled her entire body with ice-cold fear. Before she could turn and run into the safety of the forest, he saw her, ran towards her, and in an inhumane speed, as she turned to run back into the forest, she felt his hands grab her by her hair. With a bitter fury, his voice told her that she would go home with him today or know that her life would be over, right here, right now. He pulled her to him, yanking her into his arms and pulling her roughly towards his truck, placing his hands over her mouth, preventing her from making a sound. He was cursing at her, calling her every horrible name in the dictionary that no person should ever be called. Out of nowhere, Nora felt the same strength arise in her soul as had that night. She raised her leg and she kicked backwards. Jack let go of her as he yelped in pain, as any man would after being kicked where it hurt the most. As he let go, Nora ran, and she could hear him yell, and she ran, she ran, and she ran. She could hear his footsteps in the distance, when out of nowhere, she ran into a thick curtain of leaves. After months of searching for this tree, she came to a halt as she felt the leaves hug her into momentary safety. Suddenly, the world turned into night. Nora could not remember how she got here as she sat behind the thick trunk of the tree, hoping that the darkness would keep her safe. Her limbs frozen in place, she could not move. Suddenly her mind felt empty. She was not sure how she had got to this place. After what felt like hours and yet seconds apart, sitting still and moving, she saw her. The young lady in a soft white dress that reminded her of something that was made in 1945 walked up to her. When the woman spoke, tears welled up in Nora's eyes. She knew that voice. The voice of her beloved Mrs. Brothner speaking to her, yet the voice coming from a much younger face. Nora, my beautiful Nora, I knew you would find me. You're safe here. This tree will keep us safe. Soon you'll be able to go home. Remember me. I'm always with you. In the distance, the air was torn open by the sound of 2 gunshots, followed by a scream of pure, agonizing terror. Jack's screams filled the air as suddenly Nora felt her body fall into a deep slumber. Nora never found out how she got home safe that night. She could not remember how she made it back safe as she woke up in her bed in the cottage. She only remembered waking up late in the afternoon with a knock on her door. She does not remember the police officer's exact words. All Nora knows is that the officer had told her that some folks in town had seen a car drive up to her cottage and immediately called the police. They could not find her anywhere. However, they found the body of a man mauled by a black bear in the forest. She remembers identifying his body, and she remembers getting in his truck. All the rest of the memories of that day safely tucked away where her mind hid the darkness from her. Nora does not remember when or even how she got home to her and Mrs. Brothner's beautiful little house. She does not remember the days gone by and the weeks since she got home. All Nora knows is in this very moment, she is finally home and she is safe. She is happy, surrounded by her books in her little library, safely hidden from the darkness. And finally the curse had been broken, and never again would she feel the need to hold her breath. The end. If you made it to the end of this story, please leave a blue heart in the comments. I appreciate you. I hope you have sweet dreams, and I will see you again next time with another bedtime story.